fellow geeks, dweebs, nerds, and other unfortunates have been fervently waiting for has finally arrived. It's time for TMI, Confessionals of the Nerd Kind. And now, your hosts, Jeff Nerfherder Chandler, Jim Kaiju Baker, and Christina Yojimbo Henry. You can continue. And now, let's get on with the show. Here is TMI.
We are at a crossroads here at TMI with this episode. So I'm kind of sad in a way that we're doing this. So now it'll be in our past rather than our future. But this is a 5-bucket episode, and I'm going to stop talking right now because I'm letting Christina.
This is no longer our show.
I am letting Christina introduce this because she's going to own this baby. Take it away, please.
All right, but I do want you guys to not feel like you have to sit silently for the next hour while I lecture you. I mean, I would like some participation. But
I raise my hand.
We are covering Shichinin no Samurai, or Seven Samurai, directed by Akira Kurosawa. And obviously this is a 5-bucket episode. If you listen to this show, you know that the only reason I'm even on this show in the first place is because I'm a massive Kurosawa fan. And I came on initially to talk about Kurosawa's influence on The Mandalorian.
True.
So, and this is, it's a little bit over my 1-year anniversary. I think it's almost exactly the 1-year anniversary of when I started coming on for good. So I think this is appropriate, even though, yes, once we talk about it, it is in the past. So I have many, 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 many things to say about this film. But just to start off, the basic plot of this film is that this farming village is being threatened by bandits who come sort of seasonally, basically, to steal their crop. They stole their rice the previous season. Now they say, oh, well, let's come back in the fall and take their barley. The farmers feel just completely hopeless. There's a scene at the beginning where sort of everyone in the village is in the center of town weeping, saying we might as well hand over our rice and our barley to the bandits and hang ourselves because the life of a farmer is so pointless. Most of the people are in the state of profound hopelessness because they know that the local magistrate won't help them. And they decide to go and consult with the town elder. And he says, we should hire some samurai to defend the village. I saw this one time when I was young. And
he didn't see it in a movie. This is the first time that this Didn't I see that in a movie once?
Hey,
yes.
I got a great idea. Circus bugs.
But they have nothing to give these samurai because they're poor. And so he says, find hungry samurai.
Find hungry samurai. That's a very niche market.
Yeah.
Sort of the basic plot is that then these farmers go out to try to find samurai to defend their village. One thing I want to talk about before we go on any further is just like very quickly the historical context behind this, because I don't know that people are really aware of what it was like in Japan during this period. So it's the late 1580s. It's the Sengoku period. And this is a period from like roughly the end of the 1400s to the early 1600s. And basically there's a near constant state of civil war in Japan because the old feudal system collapsed. there had been an emperor, but the emperor sort of lost power. And even though there is still an emperor who's officially the ruler, he's like, it's a very ceremonial position, and the power is actually designated to a shogun. But under weaker shoguns, there's sort of these power vacuums because power decentralizes to the daimyos, who are these regional lords who are also samurai, which leads to like a lot of instability. So you have a lot of these daimyo sort of fighting for power. Now, a few years before this film takes place, Oda Nobunaga had died. Oda Nobunaga was like one of the first shoguns who sort of re-centralized power in Japan. He had power over the whole country, but then he was betrayed by a retainer and he was killed. And now there's sort of like this decentralization again. You sort of have like, series of warlords trying to, like, everyone's sort of fighting for power. So the situation that these farmers are in is that there's really nobody
looking out
in
for them.
authority who's looking out for them. And there's a lot of ronin, which are masterless samurai. They don't have a lord wandering around. And the farmers go to a big town, sort of a big, seemingly sort of crossroads type town, to find a samurai. And the first time one of them approaches a samurai, Rikichi is one of the farmers. The samurai throws him in the street and starts shouting at him, how dare you? Like, I'm a samurai, you're a farmer. And the other thing that's really important to take note of is this society has a very rigid caste system. So the emperor is at the top, then the shogun, then the daimyo, then the samurai, then like peasants and farmers, and then what were called chonin, which are like artisans, merchants, craftspeople. And there really isn't movement between the castes, and everyone's expected to know their place. So the very fact that this farmer is approaching a samurai is offensive, and his request is to this samurai outrageous. Okay. Samurai pledge themselves to a lord. They don't go and help farmers.
Right.
Okay. And samurai also are not, as part of their caste, in order to maintain their caste, they're not allowed to labor with their hands. So if a samurai who was hungry and starving decided to go and work as a farmer, he is no longer a samurai. So
Damn, that's harsh.
Yeah.
Which goes a long way to explain why the farmers are seemingly as terrified of the samurai as they are the bandits when they first arrive in town.
And because, again, this is getting ahead a little bit, but Kikuchiyo has a monologue about this later in the film, that like, yes, like farmers like will run after dying samurai and like kill them and take their armor. Well, that's because samurai like raid their villages and like rape their women and burn their houses.
They actually made it sound like they were just as afraid, if not more so afraid of the samurais than they were of the bandits. Yeah, they're gonna come in and rape your women.
So, I just wanted to make sure like people understand there's a lot of like very, very rigid systems that are in place at this time. In terms of class. And so like even for these farmers to approach the samurai is a pretty big deal. And kind of into this scenario where they feel very hopeless, they've brought this one bag of rice to feed samurai, and every time they sort of attract somebody, he eats the rice and then he leaves. He doesn't actually like stay to help them. They decide, we can't do this, we haven't gotten anybody, we've been here for too long, we're just going to leave. As they're deciding to leave, they come across this very strange situation. which is there's a large number of people gathered around a samurai who is having his head shaved by a monk. The samurai's top knot is a symbol of his status. So
Yes, we've learned that from you.
so the fact that he's removing his top knot, which is the symbol of who he is in the society, is very, very significant. And everyone's sort of watching in bewilderment. Why is he doing this?
Yeah.
There is a child who's been kidnapped by a thief, and the thief, won't come out of this shed. He says he's going to kill the kid if anybody comes in there. So this samurai, Kanbei, is disguising himself as a monk.
I love this, by the way.
In order to approach the building, he has the child's mother give him 2 rice balls. He says, "Oh, I have food for the child." He approaches seemingly very humbly, like, the child must be hungry. Here's the rice balls. The guy says, throw them at
Throw
me.
them.
And as a viewer, you're just like, get him.
Right, exactly.
So he throws the rice balls, and suddenly his demeanor changes like on a dime. He stands up, runs in, drawing his sword as he's going, and then a minute later, the thief comes out, having been stabbed, and staggers and falls to the ground.
Now, this also allows Kanbei to rub his head throughout the rest of the movie, which
it grew back pretty quick, I have to say.
Well, one of the ways actually that it shows time passing is the length of his hair.
Yeah, but I love that whole sequence. I thought that was great.
But if he's willing,
this guy's badass.
If he's willing to do that, to cut off his top knot for the villagers, the farmers see that this guy is willing to help. So he's the first one that
they're like stalking him like a gazelle. They're like chasing him down the road. He's like, "Oh wait."
And another person there's actually 2 other people who are watching this that are significant. One of them is Kikuchiyo, played by Toshiro Mifune.
Who is having way too much fun in this, by the way.
And now this is not, if you're familiar with him and you haven't seen this, which I don't know why you would be and haven't seen this, but he is so against type in this. Just a standout performance. He steals every scene he's in, which, could be said for any movie that he's in. But the character of Kikuchiyo is, I don't want to say comic relief, but he's so funny.
Yes, he's very entertaining.
Well, I mean, to a certain extent, he is played comically at the beginning. And the one thing Mifune does so well, and you see this in all of his roles, he's just an incredibly physical actor. And I just think nobody's got a swagger like him, and he has this sort of this amazingly sort of loose-limbed masculinity, and at the same time he's got this deep vulnerability, which also comes through in his physical performance. So it's just, and if you've seen it, I think it's actually, we've seen now for this show 3 films with Mifune in it, right? Hidden Fortress, in which he plays sort of a very stiff-necked general, right? We've seen Yojimbo, where he plays Sanjuro, who is more sarcastic, like he has a sort of a different morality, but again, like a very physical role, but in a different way. So I think, like, if you just took these 3 films, you could see sort of his range as an actor, and one of the reasons why Kurosawa loved him,
Yeah, in all of these films, it's like he is the center of the universe and everything else revolves around him. He is just so unique.
So he's one of the people who's watching this situation, and you can tell from the start that he's absolutely fascinated by Kanbei, and that Kanbei represents something to him that he wants. We don't know yet. And there's another person watching, which is Katsushiro, who is a young samurai who is so admiring of Kanbei from the start, and he runs after Kanbei on the road.
To So how old would we say that he is? Is he
He's-
teenager?
He's
early
supposed
20s?
to be in his
Early 20s.
early 20s. The actor Ko Kimura was 30 when he played the part, but he just looked very
He
young.
looked young. I was gonna say he's a
Now,
child.
is he like of samurai lineage? Is he just
Yes.
hopeful? Is
No,
looking
no.
for a master?
He's a samurai, and he's a wealthy samurai. And you can tell that not only because he gives money to the farmers, right, to buy the rice later.
That's true. Yes, you're right.
But also you can tell by his clothes. He's very clean, he's very well fed, like, and samurai is like a position that you're born into. That's why later Kikuchiyo claims to have the family tree.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
So you can't just decide to be a samurai.
Damn it.
Which he has apparently.
Yes, correct.
A couple of like great little subtle things that happen. So they're on the road. Kanbei's walking away from this altercation with the thief. First, Kikuchiyo runs after him, and he doesn't know what to say. Right? He just sort of stares at him, and Kanbei's like, "What do you want?
What do you want?"
And he can't say anything. And then Katsushiro approaches and says, "Oh my gosh, I admire you so much. Let me be your apprentice."
Yeah.
And he's like, "I can't do that. I don't have any money. I don't have any means to take on a retainer. Like, you can walk with me for a little while, kid, but like, I can't do anything for you." There's two themes that you hear for the first time two musical themes you hear on the road. First, you hear Kikuchiyo's theme, which is the sort of like drums and horns. There's like a little theme that plays just for Kikuchiyo. This is also when Kanbei and Katsushiro meet, is the first time you hear what I think of as the Seven Samurai theme, which is the theme that they play throughout the film, and also at the very end when you're looking at the graves.
Oh, spoiler.
So one of the interesting things here is that Kurosawa really takes his time to establish all the characters of the different samurai. But is this
3.5 hours long?
But you really get to know the people.
Yes, correct.
And I think that's so important to how you feel ultimately about the outcome.
Right. They all have their own
personalities.
Not like
agreed.
it's just a blanket monotone, kind of like Liam Neeson and Ewan McGregor in episode 1. They all have their own quirks, especially Kikuchiyo.
Well, there's some interesting things that happened like during the screenwriting. Initially, Kurosawa had approached Shinobu Hashimoto and asked him to write a story that was about a day in the life of a samurai. And so like Hashimoto said that we decided to show one day of a samurai's life from the time he woke up, prayed with incense, spent some time with his family, went to the castle and so on. At one point during the day, he would make some kind of mistake, and at the end of the story, he would commit seppuku. So that was sort of the goal of the film. And then Hashimoto went away with one of the producers and one of the assistants and did all of this research, and they could not find stuff about samurai's daily life. They just couldn't get the details that they wanted because all the history books were sort of about battles and like big events, and they just couldn't
not the in-between moments.
Right, and they couldn't get this information. So Hashimoto goes back to Kurosawa and says, I can't do it. And Kurosawa is really mad now because he's been waiting for 3 months for this script. So Kurosawa goes over their research and they start debating some different ideas. And as they're going over the research, Kurosawa discovers a real life incident in which peasant farmers hired a samurai to protect their village from roaming bandits.
There you go.
And he's like, this is the story. So
get 6 more and we're good to go.
So Hashimoto starts writing the script, and Kurosawa tells him, like, don't do it in script format, like just write freely. And the result is 500 pages long.
So
then they took Hashimoto's story. And there's 3 screenwriters. It's Akira Kurosawa, Shinobu Hashimoto, and Hideo Oguni. And the 3 of them went to this inn for 6 weeks where there was nobody was allowed to take a phone call and no visitors allowed except for Mifune. And they sat every day and they would all work on the same scene.
Huh.
And what they would do is each write their version of a scene and then they would pass it counterclockwise around the table. They have a very specific process. Everyone sat in the same place every day. They would pass the scene around, and then they would sort of pool their ideas. And the interesting thing is that Oguni was the one with veto power, not Kurosawa. It was Oguni who was the final arbiter of what went into the script.
Huh.
So they had they're developing like the different things, and Kurosawa, you will not be surprised to discover, had notes on every samurai, like how tall they would be, how they would walk, how they would answer when people spoke to them. Like he had this whole Bible of the samurai's characteristics. He also had a registry of the villagers' 101 residents,
Jeez.
the 23 families. He spent time annotating every character.
That's crazy.
Even if they weren't going to actually have a speaking line in the film. But the result of that is that you really feel like there's real life behind.
It's a lived-in universe, yeah.
Right. And so that brings, if an actor, even if he doesn't have a line,
right,
like they can be told, okay.
Sure. I mean, I would assume a lot of actors who, like have to kind of make up their own backstory to some of their characters. Like, well, what's this guy's motivation? Well, I don't know. Tell me.
I'll tell you exactly.
Exactly. I'll tell you exactly what it is.
Here's a 30-page tome on what your character has been through.
Right. Now, it will not surprise you to discover that the only character who did not have this kind of notation was Kikuchiyo. Because there was no Kikuchiyo in the original script. There were 6 samurai. And Mifune came to visit because he was the only one who was allowed to come. They realized that at that time they were thinking Kurosawa's intention was to give the role of Kyozo, the swordsman, to Mifune. They realized that they had what, in Mifune's words, were 6 boring samurai. That basically that they were all serious, and that they needed some kind of off-the-wall character. And so they created Kikuchiyo, and then Kurosawa said to Mifune, he's your character, do what you want. But that was how they worked. Kurosawa really trusted Mifune. He sort of trusted that he would come up with the right things, that he would do like the best thing for the character and the best thing for the movie. Yu Fujuki, who is on the set of The Lower Depths with them, said Kurosawa-san's heart was inside Mifune-san's body. And like, I think it's just a great way of talking about how symbiotic their relationship was, and how they really understood that they were both working for the greater good of the movie, that they were both working for the movie, and that Kurosawa trusted him.
Was this the first movie they worked on together?
No.
Okay.
Yeah, they had been.
Because I know the Yojimbo was after this. Yojimbo was like 61. This is 54. And Hidden Fortress was
the 40s was the beginning of their relationship.
Okay.
Right.
Gotcha. Yeah. So they definitely had a shorthand as far as relationship goes.
Right. The first major role that Mifune had, he got in Snow Trail because of Kurosawa. That's not a Kurosawa film, but he got it because of Kurosawa. And then he plays a gangster with tuberculosis in Drunken Angel.
Oh my.
And that's like, his first Kurosawa picture, and it's you can just see from the start, you can sort of see his star quality, and that way he has of drawing your eye all the time when he's on screen. If you've never watched their contemporary films, they did a number of films that were set in contemporary Japan at the time. Stray Dog, Drunken Angel, High and Low, The Bad Sleep Well. You guys should watch those too, because they're really, really good. They didn't
Yeah.
only make samurai films together.
What he does with Kukuchiyo is, as an audience member, you're looking to see what his reaction is to everything that takes place, because you want to see it through this character's eyes.
So the farmers decide, after they see this thing with Kanbei, that they can approach him, that he will at least not like punch them, right, and throw them in the street. And Kanbei's abiding characteristic, I think, is his compassion. Like, I feel like he can't help feeling for people in need, or people he perceives to be in need. He at first is going to reject the farmers, but then one of the coolies who's in the farm where they're staying, like, starts laughing, talking about how pathetic the farmers are because they're crying now.
Yeah.
And saying, like, farmers are so pathetic, they should all just go kill themselves. This is all they have to give you, this rice. And then Kanbei accepts the bowl of rice, and he's like, thank you, I will take your rice, and I will work for you. So now comes, like, again, this fairly long sequence where they're trying to gather more samurai to come and help, and Kanbei's not super hopeful that they're going to get a lot of people. And they decide to come up with this little test where Katsushiro stands in the doorway with a stick.
This is like a running joke.
Like,
this didn't really think this through at all.
This kid is going to get killed by doing this.
So, the first samurai who comes through the door very quickly disarms Katsushiro, and it takes complete offense. How dare you?
Yep.
And he's offended, kind of by Kanbei's request too. First he's like, oh, you want me to come do some work? Who's your lord? And then they're like, well, we don't exactly have a lord. Like, we're going to do this for some farmers. And he's like, no. And then you get the immediate impression that most samurai will respond this way.
Right. And they're not even going to get paid. They're going to get paid in food.
That's all.
Right.
In food, yep.
But then the next one who comes through the door is Gorobei. And Gorobei has such a delightful response to the test. He doesn't even come through the door. He sees the shadow and he just starts laughing. He's like, are you kidding?
Yeah.
So he comes in, and his good nature, I think, immediately makes Kanbei feel good about him. And then Gorobei is also attracted to, I think, the qualities of leadership and compassion in Kanbei. So Gorobei stays, and he's going to be part of their little band. Gorobei goes out into the village. He's just sort of walking around, and he comes across Heihachi, who's a samurai who's decided to chop some wood for some food because he is hungry. Gorobei says of Heihachi later that he'll be a treasure in hard times, right? Because he's good-natured, and he's funny, and he's the sort of person who doesn't take life too seriously. Minoru Chiaki plays Heihachi, and I don't know if you guys recognized him. He's in Hidden Fortress as well. He plays Tahei in Hidden Fortress, one of the two guys who gets sucked into Rokuruda's plan. And he's also in Rashomon, if you've ever seen that. He's in a ton of Kurosawa films. He was one of Kurosawa's kind of stock players. He's one of my favorite actors. I just think he has like wonderfully expressive eyes, and he plays such a charming character here, and he's really perfect in this part. And then they get Shichiroji, who's should also be familiar to you, played by Daisuke Kato. He's in Yojimbo. and he played Inokichi, the brother who looked like a pig.
Yes.
And he's actually a former retainer of Kanbei's. Kanbei had thought that Shichiroji had died in the last battle that they fought in, but somehow Shichiroji had managed to escape. He says, do you want to come along? Maybe we'll die this time. And Shichiroji smiles, because you can sort of tell that these are two people who are just really tired.
Yeah.
And they're like, yeah, like we might as well go and like throw ourselves into this, and maybe like we'll be able to die honorably and have some rest, basically. And then they find Kyozo,
the Terminator of this group.
Who is about to have a sword fight with bamboo sticks, with a guy who clearly feels that his honor has been impugned for some reason. And he's being really aggressive. And you can tell before they even start fighting who's going to win this fight. Because one guy is sort of yelling and posturing and doing all this kind of stuff. And Kyozo is just very calm. He sets himself in position. My son practiced martial arts for 8 years, and I can tell you that the foot positions that Kyozo uses will tell you straight off that like he knows what he's doing and he's going to be the victor here.
Love the audience. They're watching it like it's a tennis match, or like back and forth watching,
Right. Well, this is one of the great things about Kurosawa is 'cause you see like a number of perspectives, right? You see the perspective from the point of view of the audience, where you see the two of them facing one another across the field. You see the perspective from the other side, where you see Kanbei and Katsushiro responding to what's happening as well. And so they have this little quick battle, and the other guy says, oh, it's a draw. And Kyozo's like, nope. I won. like not even in an argumentative way, just in a very matter-of-fact way. Like, nope, I won. And the guy's like, gets very, very upset. And he's like, look, if this was a real battle, you would be dead. And the guy's like, I want to fight. And then then Kyozo's like, don't throw your life away. Like, this is dumb. And then Kanbei, watching it, says, like, it's so obvious what's going to happen. He knows. They get in place again, and sure enough, Kyozo kills the guy in one stroke, like, very efficiently. So, of course, Kanbei and Katsushiro, who has big time hero worship after this incident.
I know, he is beside himself now. He's just like, he doesn't know who to look after. Oh.
Yeah, right.
And again, like, so well cast. Ko Kimura has like, these like sort of huge liquid eyes. He just looks like a puppy, and he's like clearly so admiring. His face is just full of like this sort of glow of admiration. And they try to get Kyozo to come, and he says no. They're like, okay, they go home, they go back, they feel sad about it, but like, whatever. And then the coolie comes into the barn and says, hey, aren't you guys looking for samurai? I know a really tough samurai. I just saw him take down like a whole bunch of guys. And Katsushiro's like, oh, should we do the thing again with the stick?
Yes. And this is great. This is great.
And he stands at the door, and who comes through the door but Kikuchiyo, drunk, completely drunk, like barely standing up drunk. And of course, because he's not actually a samurai, and he's drunk, Katsushiro like cracks him in the noggin.
Clobbers him.
Yeah.
Which doesn't go down too well.
Right. And this is where like you really see like that incredible physicality, you know. So Kikuchiyo gets up, he kind of chases Katsushiro all around. He shows his supposed family tree, right, where he claims to be on this list of, you know, from a great samurai family. And of course, the person he's claiming to be is actually only 13 years old.
Which would also indicate that he either can't work out math or he can't read the document that he.
Right.
But it's funny because that's what they call him from that point on. The name that's on the family, and it sounds, when you think about it, like a kid's name.
Mm-hmm. And then another sort of funny sequence happens where they sort of throw around the scroll and he chases them, right? And Heihachi is sort of the main instigator of this. The first thing you see from here is him. He's very drunk, he's very aggressive, but again, you see this great vulnerability where he's like, I'm one of you. I'm, you know, I'm not a farmer, like I'm not a peasant, I'm a samurai, I'm like you guys. And they're all sitting on this platform. And again, this great point of view shot where you see it from Kikuchiyo's eyes, where he's saying, this is me. And they're all laughing at him. They're all like clean and well dressed and sitting like in a well lit space. And he's lying in the muck on the ground and they're laughing at him. You know, he wants so badly to belong to them that he follows them, even though they laughed at him. You know, even though they didn't take him seriously, he wants so much to be a part of who they are.
And once you get to know him a little bit better and what his past is, you know, to watch this again, it gives you a different insight to him as well in these early scenes. It's a mixture of hatred and just wonderment with them, wanting to be a part of them.
Forgot to mention that Kyozo did ultimately decide to join their group, so they decide they're going to go. And Kikuchiyo follows them. And this sort of ends what I think of as like the first act of the film. So it gets a fairly long sequence that's almost anecdotal, right? It's just a bunch of little stories, like little moments that sort of build up, and then they start heading back to the village. Again, you just have this great sequence where they're walking along and Kikuchiyo is sort of stubbornly following them, and they're occasionally like looking back and watching to see what he does. And then at one point, Heihachi looks back and says, oh, he's gone. You know, oh, that's too bad. I sort of miss him. And then Kikuchiyo pops out in front of them. I guess he's taken it as they haven't chased him off, so it's okay for him to stay.
Right.
You know what made me laugh was, I forget which one of the other characters says this to him, but they ask him, why are you always screaming?
Heihachi says that later, right? Because that's when they're in the tent talking to
Yes.
Yeah. Like, why are you screaming about everything? So they go to the village. Two of the farmers have returned. Manzo and Mosuke have returned ahead of the samurai, basically to say, like, Yohei and Rikichi are getting the other samurai, and, like, you know, they're going to be along soon. And Manzo, again, played by a guy who should be familiar to you, Kamatari Fujiwara, also in Hidden Fortress, also in Yojimbo. He is very, very paranoid. He has a daughter, and he's worried about his daughter being seduced by dangerous samurai. And he causes a complete ruckus, like telling his daughter she needs to cut her hair and dress as a boy and disguise herself. And she runs away because she's like, no, why would I do that? He chases her out of their house. the whole village gets involved, like
Yeah, this is
witnesses
ugly.
this.
Yeah.
And now what he's done is created this seed of unease with his behavior, because he's actually met the samurai. So now the villagers are like, oh, well, Manzo's
Yeah.
met them and he's acting this way. So they must not be very good. And now they're scared of the samurai that are supposedly coming to help
To
them.
protect them. Yeah.
Well, if maybe there's precedent for this, maybe they have been victims of samurai as well as the bandits in the past. So maybe
Well, I mean, I think that the important thing to remember here is that some of these bandits probably are samurai. They're samurai without lords who just made this decision to survive this way.
And as we know, some of the women we find out later have been taken by these
Yes.
bandits.
And that's one of the reasons why in the first shot you see of the villagers, Rikichi is the one who's like, let's fight them. Because Rikichi really, really, really has a personal reason to go after the bandits. He wants revenge on the bandits. When all the other villagers are crying, he's saying, we should just fight them. We should kill them, So they come to the village and Rikichi and Yohei are like, we're here. We have the samurai, and nobody
Came out. Yeah.
is coming out. Everyone's hiding. So Rikichi and the 6 of the samurai go to talk to the old man, who says, well, you have to understand they're kind of simple and they don't really. So you can tell that Kanbei and the other samurai feel very offended, and they're starting to reconsider staying. And then all of a sudden the alarm starts going off. Someone's sounding the alarm. And all the villagers run out. Oh my gosh, samurai, please help us, please help us. And the samurai come running very valiantly, where are the bandits? Where are the bandits? Who's seen them? Who has information? And then someone says, who sounded the alarm? And here comes Kikuchiyo sounding the alarm. And he basically mocks the villagers and says, you were afraid of us 5 minutes ago, but now that there's a threat, you're like, oh, samurai, please help us.
He wanted a big welcome because, he is the masquerader here. It's like, I'm a samurai now. I want the big welcome.
But also, because we find out later that, of course, he's not a samurai.
Right.
He's the son of a farmer. He is the bridge between the samurai's understanding of the farmers and the farmers' understanding of the samurai. And he knows how they're thinking and how they're acting. And because of what he does, he makes the tension dissipate, right, between the samurai and the farmers. And even the old man comes and says, yes, everything's fine now. You did the right thing. Kikuchiyo understands them. And Kikuchiyo helps the samurai understand them. Now you have this sort of second sequence. So there's the film sort of broken down into 3 scenes, basically, which are the recruitment of the samurai, the training for the battle,
the A-team montage,
right, and then the final battle, right? Kurosawa is very, very careful to show you the geography of the town.
It's this map that they build out. I mean, there's some serious topography skills right there. It is pretty impressive when you lay out a set design like that.
Because you need to know this as an audience member, what they're planning and how they're defending this town. You're given a guided tour in this sequence.
Yeah, but it's well thought out, and all right, well, if you were a bandit, where would you come from? Well, I'd come from over that mountain right there. All right, well, let's block that off. So it was very well executed. I thought that was great.
And it serves multiple purposes, because it doesn't just show you the town, the geography of the town, how everything's laid out, the potential things that they'll do to defend the town and so on. He says, okay, we're going to flood these fields, we'll put a barrier here. You also see the various samurai leading teams, either in training or in Shichiroji's case, they're building a barrier. And you see different things again about their personalities. So you see like Shichiroji like being very positive and like getting them singing and like, doing all this stuff to feel positive about their labor. You see Kyozo training
Yeah.
the villagers saying like, come at me. And then like he very quickly disarms them. And, he's like, okay, you have to do better. Like,
Yep.
and just in this very matter of fact way, you see Heihachi like sitting around like making them laugh, right? See, again, like you just get this sense of the samurai as people, the way the villagers respond to them, and then of course you see Kikuchiyo training his group, and you see that all the children have come to where he is, like he's the Pied Piper.
Yeah.
The kids just love to be where Kikuchiyo is. And there's just something about the way he plays to them that makes you feel like maybe he was like that in real life, that just like kids would come to him because he sort of like mugs and plays around and like makes them laugh. And
Yeah, that was cute.
he's gruff with the villagers, but you know that he doesn't mean it. There's just this way that he is, especially of course with Yohei, who's like his little sort of right hand man. This scene actually leads to a big inflection point between the farmer and the samurai. Kikuchiyo notices that Yohei has an actual spear. He doesn't just have like a bamboo stick. He says, where did you get this? He thinks this will be really helpful. I know they've got armor hidden somewhere and weapons, and I'll have them bring that stuff out and show the samurai. And they bring it in, and all the samurai are really furious with the villagers. Like, oh, I want to kill them now, And Kikuchi was like, why? It's like, well, you don't know what it's like to be hunted. They ran after dying samurai and they killed them and took their armor and their weapons. And Kikuchiyo's like, okay, yeah, they do that. Farmers are actually not like the noble peasants that you think they are. Like, they're pretty jerky, He's like, they've got, like, you think they're poor? They have stockpiles everywhere. They have rice, they have beans, they have salt, they have sake, they have all these things hidden away. Like, farmers are not like these noble poor people that you think they are. And he says, but you know what? You know why they're like that? It's because of you. It's because of samurai. And it's such a passionate monologue. And it's shot so that Mifune is talking into the camera. He's talking directly to the audience. Yeah. And it has such a powerful impact. And again, like, he's so magnetic, and you feel, this intense frustration that he has with the samurai, who don't seem to understand the kind of people that they're actually dealing with. And also that samurai don't understand everything that they've done wrong, kind of culturally. And you can tell that he gets through to them because one by one, they all drop their eyes. They all look down in shame because they realize, okay, maybe we're not so noble either. Yeah. Like, maybe every samurai isn't, as great as we think of ourselves. And this is when Kanbei says to Kikuchiyo, you're a farmer's son, aren't you? And Kikuchiyo like kind of storms off. And then you realize, of course, like, who he really is. And again, this is that really important part that he plays where he bridges the gap between these two very, very different cultures. After this kind of like training sequence, it's interesting because after Kikuchiyo's speech lecture there, it seems like he's more accepted, I think, by the other samurai. Because he's one of the few that gets sent on this very important raid to the bandits' hideout. They decide that maybe they can go and take out some of the bandits. And again, this counting of the number of bandits left is so important to the the storytelling of the
I
film.
was counting. When they got down to the last
Yeah.
13, I'm like, all right, let's see if this plays out. I'm like, oh yeah, okay, look at this.
As soon as I saw that chart, I'm like, that's exactly what I need. So
many
yeah, it was a
bandits?
great device.
And this whole set piece with the waterfalls and the bandits hideout was pretty impressive.
So Heihachi, Kikuchiyo, Rikichi, they go to the bandits' hideout with the intention of trying to kill some of them before they attack.
Bad, yeah.
Because they were forced into it because of the scouts, the bandit scouts that
Right.
came into the town.
Oh yeah, we
Right.
didn't bring that up. That the old farmer lady, basically kills him, right? I mean, off screen, but
The samurai are initially saying like you can't kill him because he's like a prisoner of war and he's, surrendered. And then she shows up, her whole family's been killed by the bandits. So then it's sort of decided that as an act of justice, she'll be allowed to avenge her family by killing this one guy with a hoe, which does not seem like a comfortable way to die.
no, that
So they go to the bandits' hideout to try to take out some of them. Rikichi sets fire to the building in order to get the bandits to come out. First, a lot of women run out, and then some of the bandits are coming out and they kill some of them. And then one of the bandits off screen fires a gun, and they have to take shelter. They have to run away from the burning building. But just as they're doing this, another woman comes out and Rikichi runs toward her. And this scene is so heartbreaking because it's his wife. She's been kidnapped by the bandits. He's clearly willing to take her back as he just wants her back.
right.
But she also just as clearly feels ashamed because she's been kidnapped and raped, which is like doesn't make any sense, but there you go. Like it wasn't her fault, but she feels ashamed and she can't face him. So she runs back inside the burning building. And he tries to run after her. And Heihachi is like, "What are you doing, you idiot?" Runs up to get Rikichi and he gets shot. And this is to me like one of the most heartbreaking deaths in the film because Heihachi was supposed to be their treasure in hard times. And he was supposed to be the one who would make them laugh and who would make them feel better when things were difficult. And he's just killed in such a senseless way. And he doesn't even have the opportunity to kind of die while he's taking someone else out or, whatever. Interesting thing about this sequence, the day they shot it, it was really, really dry, which I think you can actually kind of tell if you watch the scene how fast that building catches fire. The flames got very hot very quickly, much more quickly than they expected. The actor who plays Rikichi, Tsuchiya, he was supposed to be trying to run in after his wife. And Mifune was standing next to Kurosawa by the camera and he said, "What is he doing?" Because he kept missing his marks and they couldn't figure out why. And then suddenly he bursts into tears and runs into the pond. And it turns out he had bursted into tears because he was very upset that he was ruining the shot for Kurosawa. But also, when Kurosawa called cut and went over to talk to him, there were blisters forming on his face because the heat coming off the building was so much more intense than they expected. He couldn't hit his marks. He was trying to.
Wow.
And every time he tried to approach the building, he was actually getting burned.
Oofa.
But he was in great distress that he might have ruined the take.
Which is understandable because you
can only burn it once, right?
Fire, yeah.
And also because Kurosawa was Kurosawa and he was the emperor.
Yeah.
And
you don't want to disappoint the emperor,
right? And nobody wanted to, displease him. So after this scene, you basically move on to a series of incidents that are the final battle, right? The bandits are pretty pissed now.
Yeah. Yeah. And they
That
definitely got their
it's-
attention.
It's interesting because they treat the bandits up until the end as the unknown entity. You see them in the beginning when they're arguing about whether or not they should go into the town. No, 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 let's wait until they have some more food that we can plunder. Then you don't see them again until much later on. And they're kind of like that unknown quantity. So while you may ask yourself, okay, why aren't they building up the bandits? I think you're more afraid of them when you don't know them, when they're the unknown out there and you don't know when they're going to hit or what they're planning.
And when they first start coming to the village, they're clearly not even remotely prepared for the possibility that the villagers might fight back. And there's these great scenes of like some of them kind of getting through, really sort of crawling about in desperation as they're like hacked and speared by villagers. The scene where like Yohei spears the bandit is such a great example of this. You know, Yohei's almost accidentally, it seems like, managed to spear this bandit, and the light is so gorgeous. Like it's sort of shadow all around. There's just light on their faces. Yohei looks stunned that he's managed to do this. The bandit looks stunned because he can't believe,
He can't believe it.
And Kikuchiyo's like, great, you did a great job. You know, but you see like every time a bandit gets through, they're just fighting with this absolute sort of shock desperation, like, how can these little ants fight back against us?
It was
And they're
very well
getting-
executed that they were only allowing one or two in at a time.
Right.
It was pretty ingenious.
And just their amazement as each time they encounter each roadblock that's been set up, the fence, and then they try to go through the fields. The one guy that's poking the water to see if he can walk, and suddenly he falls right in.
At every turn, they seem kind of surprised by what's happened. And it's interesting to me because even like as their numbers get whittled down, they keep sort of stubbornly trying to.
Yeah, they never give up. I'll give them that. They never give up.
They never give up. Never give up. Never surrender.
And after a while, you don't really understand the point of it. It's like, well, you've lost more than half your men, so why don't you just move on to an easier village?
Yeah.
You know, if that was the case. But you actually see later when Kikuchiyo decides of his own accord to go and steal one of the rifles, that
was badass.
Now, what was badass was Kyozo going off into the night.
No, that's it. And he comes back, he goes, I killed two. Here's a gun.
I got this. Don't worry. And then he just leaves.
And one of the reasons why Kikuchiyo feels compelled to go and get the gun is because Katsushiro is so admiring of what Kyozo's done that he won't stop talking about it, you know, and Kikuchiyo wants the same degree of respect that Kyozu's got.
I know, because when Kyozo comes back and just hands over the like it's no big deal. Like, I do this every day.
There you go.
And the kid's like, you are an exceptional human being.
So Kikuchiyo decides he too wants to go off and get this, you know, the same degree of prestige. So he goes off, and the way he does it is quite funny because he pretends to be one of the bandits and sits down.
I know, that was great. Yes.
Before that, he witnesses the bandits killing two of their own who are trying to leave. So they've conveniently taken out another two.
Thank you.
But you also see that like a number of these bandits are thinking, this is pretty stupid. You know, why do we keep like battering our heads against this village for no reason? There's some dissension in the ranks and their numbers are getting whittled down, and Kikuchiyo does manage to get the second gun, but at a very high cost, because Yohei is killed and so is Gorobe. And now, like, you know, it's really starting to hurt. They're losing people. You know, the villagers actually get a little overconfident at one point. Like, oh, these bandits aren't so bad, you know, like we can handle this. But now, you know, people are dying, and so like it's not funny anymore. So then Kanbei thinks, you know, they're not going to try to fight again tonight. but tomorrow is going to be the big battle.
Now, who is the actor playing Kanbei?
Takashi Shimura.
I just want to say a word about him. As much as we're lauding Mifune, Kanbei centers this so strongly as the leader, as he should be. I was just as impressed with him as I was with Mifune throughout the film.
Yeah, well, again, like if you watch Kurosawa's film, Takashi Shimura was kind of Kurosawa's guy, his leading man before Mifune. And there's a number of films where, like in Drunken Angel and Stray Dog, and of course here in Seven Samurai, where Shimura sort of plays the mentor role to like a younger character that Mifune is playing. In Drunken Angel, Mifune is the gangster that has TB, and Shimura plays a doctor who's trying to save his life, even though he keeps trying to throw it away. In Stray Dog, they're an older policeman and a younger policeman. But Shimura also plays the main role, and Mifune is not in it, in Akiro, which is probably his best part. This actually, Seven Samurai, in a lot of ways, is sort of like a handoff movie where you can sort of see the transition from Shimura as Kurosawa's leading man to Mifune as the leading man. So now we're into like this final battle, and they decide, they're just going to go all out. The shooting of this scene was unbelievably horrible.
He loves his weather element.
Every one of the actors talked about how horrific the shooting of this scene was. First of all, it's February. And second of all, Kurosawa got this idea in his head that, there was going to be a lot of rain. So he thought, and this idea came from, because Kurosawa loved Westerns, and he loved John Ford films specifically. And he said, all those films, they always take place in the desert and they're all dry. So I thought we'll have a wet battle sequence.
Yeah. How'd that play out?
So he turns on the rain machines, like with this torrential rain. But before that, so just as they're about, getting ready to shoot the scene, it had snowed. So they had to clear all the snow. Then there's like, the mud is basically like ice water.
Oof, yeah.
And then Kurosawa turns on the rain machine. Poor Mifune is basically naked.
I know.
I know. Yeah, that is some.
He is Winnie the Poohing all the way through this. He's got shirt with no pants.
He's just wearing like a loincloth with armor over it. And you can actually see the actor's breath in some of the scenes. Like you can see how cold it is, and they've got the rain falling on them. And and like Mifune's wearing like no clothes.
Yeah.
He did have to go to the hospital for 2 weeks when they were done because, he was exhausted and he probably had hypothermia. So they have this climactic battle sequence. Kikuchiyo, of course, bravely confronts the man with the rifle, and he kills the leader of the bandits. But he himself dies ignominiously in the mud like a farmer, but also like a samurai. And Kyozo is killed, and Katsushiro is inconsolable, and he runs around saying like, where are the bandits, because he clearly just wants to kill something now, but all the bandits are dead. The battle's over, and they suffered unimaginable losses for this. And of course, poor Kanbei and Chichiroji, who wanted to die, have somehow managed to live again. And then at the end, all of the farmers are like, cheerily singing and, kind of rebuilding their lives. And they clearly just want the samurai to go.
Yep. Job here is done. Thank you very much.
And Kanbei, I think, has been very disillusioned by this process because he comes into it thinking like, I'm going to valiantly save the noble and pure-hearted farmers. And then he realizes that they're not like that at all, and he's disillusioned at the end. In addition to not being able to die, which he really wanted to do. So yes, it's a long movie, but in my opinion, every element is necessary.
Yeah, I was reading in some of the stuff that I saw that it was edited down originally for U.S. audiences, and they
Yeah.
took like close to an hour out. We were talking last week about being captive to a filmmaker when you go to the theater. That's one of the joys of going to a theater, is that you're there without any distractions. Now, unfortunately, as I get older, it's harder and harder for me, at home especially, to sit through without nodding off. Not saying anything bad about the movie. It's just I can't do it. So this, I had to work into one of the, the greatest miniseries ever over the course of a week. I think I started Tuesday and watched a bit of it every single night, right up until a couple of nights ago.
You could have saved yourself 45 minutes and just skipped through the credits.
But having said that, again, nothing is wasted. I can't see what they would have taken out.
Oh,
So-
well done character development.
They cut the 50. Toho actually did the cutting. Okay, because they were afraid that Western audiences wouldn't sit through it. And it actually, if you read some of the reviews from that time, even with the cut length, a lot of Western reviewers were kind of contemptuous of how long it was. But most of the footage cut was Rikichi's mysterious behavior, Manzo's cutting of Shino's hair, the entire subplot with the old peasant woman. Among other scenes deleted were Kikuchiyo's drunk scene with the samurai, which I think is incredibly important.
I was going to say, it informs you so much about him.
And several scenes with Kyozo, which it just completely destroys the whole character development between like Katsushiro and Kyozo and Kikuchiyo. So like a lot of what was cut was character stuff, and I think that the whole fabric of this film is dependent on you getting to know the samurai really well, getting to know the farmers really well, so that you understand these people before they start fighting. This is not a film that's just about fighting, and it's fundamentally too about the relationship between the samurai and the farmers. In this very rigid caste society. So I don't understand why this stuff was cut, but yeah, they were afraid that Western audiences wouldn't sit through it. There are a lot of again, like jerk reviews, condescending jerk reviews, like this one. The Japanese lately have been full of surprises. Having for some years watched Hollywood mystery films, they turned out a picture called Rashomon. Then, having viewed the Occidental color film technique, they properly matched our best films with samurai. Now, having been treated to many U.S. gun and gallop westerns, our Oriental cinema cousins have ground out a Far East western that may well turn out to be the daddy of them all. And like almost all of the reviews talked about how long it was, how it was overly long. I think it was a film that was not really appreciated in the West at the time. And at least part of that is probably because like a large amount of the character development that matters to the film was cut out.
So yeah, you think that the filmmakers are inept by when you watch this in an edited version, I'm sure, because one of the things that you just said, where they cut out the cutting of the girl's hair. Well, how would they even explain, to an audience? Well, is this the same girl that I was seeing before? And how could they? Because that was the scene where she's introduced when he cuts her hair.
Right. So, the film was actually not called Seven Samurai in the U.S. initially. It was called The Magnificent Seven.
Really? Are you serious?
Yes,
really?
I'm serious.
That's pretty wild.
It was renamed The Magnificent Seven for its U.S. release, partially to distinguish it from the Inagaki film Samurai, which is the first of the Miyamoto trilogy, which had come out the previous year and had actually won an Oscar.
I didn't want to confuse people. Where's the other six?
Right. So they
I
can't
haven't
be
seen
like,
it.
oh, we can't have two films with the word samurai in
it.
them
Yeah.
because Americans are stupid.
Yes. Well,
So,
back there. There's some truth in that one.
so the film was renamed Magnificent Seven for the U.S. release, and then the person who bought the rights from Toho bought them to remake it, as an American film. Bought the rights for $250.
Wow.
Yeah,
What?
Toho
Really?
really let the rights go cheap, which
Damn.
ended up much later. There was some suing on Kurosawa's
Jeez.
part.
I know. That wouldn't even be enough to buy the Toho staff lunch. $250.
Look what I bought today.
Other things that are interesting. During the 1950s, most Japanese films were shot in 4 to 6 weeks. Seven Samurai was in production for almost a year.
Oof.
With 148 shooting days. And Kurosawa not only went over budget, he went way over budget. like so far over budget that they were apparently talking about replacing him.
Pulling it. Well.
Didn't they shut down production a number of times?
Yeah, production. Well, production was shut down by Toho at one point, like when he sort of reached his budget limit, and then it was like, are we gonna continue? Are we gonna replace Kurosawa with another director and just try to salvage this, or are we gonna let just shut the whole thing down? So, and the interesting thing was at the same time, they were filming Gojira, the first Godzilla film, which was also, relatively speaking, expensive. Not as expensive as Seven Samurai, but it costs much more than their normal films. And so they were feeling very cash strapped, and they
should have merged the two together.
But it's
Samurai Godzilla.
It's insane to think that these two landmark Japanese films came out the same year.
Yeah.
Same company as well.
Yep.
And they were really, really afraid that the films weren't going to make money. But apparently during the lull, when Toho was sort of contemplating their fate, Kurosawa very confidently said, they're not going to fire me because they've invested too much money. This little temporary setback didn't even put a hitch in his stride. He was not humbled by the fact that they were thinking about pulling him off the movie. He basically came back and just demanded everything that he had wanted before.
And another thing.
One really interesting thing is Yoshio Tsuchiya, who plays Rikichi. This was his one of his first big roles. He was actually a former medical student. And Stuart Galbraith, who wrote The Emperor and the Wolf, which is a joint biography of Mifune and Kurosawa, I've mentioned before. And if you have any interest in this era or these two people, you should absolutely read it. Stuart Galbraith describes Tsuchiya as deliriously eccentric. He turns in a really powerful performance, I think, in Seven Samurai. And Toho really wanted to groom him to be a leading man like Mifune. But he didn't want to be a leading man. And he wanted to play weird roles. And he doesn't seem to have been that interested in acting for an actor. As the shooting for Seven Samurai went on, he told Kurosawa he was just going to take 10 days off to go mountain climbing. He's like, I'm just going to go mountain climbing. Kurosawa's like, you can't do that. We're in the middle of shooting a movie.
I'll be back.
So Tsuchiya was like, I guess I'll stay. And Kurosawa was like, you have to come and live with me at my house. So he basically, because he was afraid he was going to leave. And so
you gotta come live with me.
He's like, hey, you almost ruined my shot with the burning building.
Right?
You gotta stay. Yeah.
So he went to live at Kurosawa's house with his wife and their son, and his wife's parents, and Tsuchiya lived with Kurosawa for almost 2 years. And it was really, really funny. There's a very funny little anecdote in the book where Tsuchiya talks about going to the studio with Kurosawa in the same car because they were, arriving on the set every day together, and people would bow at the gate because Kurosawa was coming. And Tsuchiya would wave like he was the emperor. And Kurosawa said, "Why are you waving? Like, they're bowing to me." And Tsuchiya said, "I like it. It makes me feel like the emperor." And Kurosawa said, "No, I am the emperor."
Smackdown.
Kurosawa never said anything about the American remake except to say in 1980, gunslingers are not samurai.
Now,
19
what is your opinion
Mhm.
of the remake?
Well, I mean, it just misses a lot of character development. I mean, it's pretty one note.
Yeah.
It doesn't have that same quality, I think, that Seven Samurai has. I think that the more recent remake of the remake, the one with Denzel Washington, I think does a little bit of a better job trying to establish them as characters and as individuals. But I mean, I just think if you're not willing to invest the time to really get to know these people, it's just not going to come up to snuff, in my opinion.
I must have fallen asleep because I completely missed the part where Flick built the giant bird.
Yeah, you missed it.
Yeah, I missed it. All right, I'll have to go back and rewatch.
I remember I told my son a couple years ago, I was like, Bug's Life is Seven Samurai. And he's like, what? Like, he just, I'm like, no, it is.
Yeah. You mentioned this was the first time that this structure was presented on film. And it's been used, not just in the remake, but again and again and again in some way, shape, or form. It seems, though, as time has gone on, it seems that filmmakers tend to favor that Three Amigos Bug's Life, where the group that's assembling doesn't really know that they're real. Like Galaxy Quest is another,
Well, Galaxy Quest is basically the same story. Again, like, we'll get the tough samurai to come and defend the village, except it's a spaceship.
Right.
But the thing is, like, you could think of it as a formula, and it has made some successful movies with that formula, but nobody is sort of willing to invest the same amount of time to.
No, you take it at surface level. Yeah.
Now, we mentioned that this came out the same year as Gojira. Can you please point out, because Gojira makes a cameo in Seven Samurai?
What?
It's not Gojira. You tell it, because you're.
Well, I don't know which one exactly he is. So I was hoping that
it's
would
not
come up at some point. Yeah. Yes.
It's not right, because most Toho players were Toho players. They were like stock players, and so they were. It's I'm actually not sure which one it is, but there are like a lot of actors. If you watch a Toho film, you've seen them in other Toho films. One thing I do want to talk about is the music. Fumio Hayasaka, there's a connection to Gojira because he was a huge influence on Akira Ifukube, the composer of Godzilla. I think the score is amazing. This was not the last score that he did, but it was one of the last. He had tuberculosis. If you know anything about tuberculosis, it kills people very slowly over a long period of time. He was astoundingly ill when he was composing this. He actually was writing things in bed, and Masaru Sato, who was his protege and his arranger, was sitting next to him, helping him arrange the score. Hayasaka had done almost all of Kurosawa's films up to that point, and Sato ends up taking over after I think I Live in Fear, and scores most of Kurosawa's films after that. He did the incredible score for Yojimbo, and also for Gojira versus Mecha Gojira, which we reviewed recently. This film ended up doing very well financially in Japan. So did Gojira. And most of the ticket sales were at theaters that Toho owned. So they ended up making money back, which they clearly needed after spending all this money on the film. And it's really a banner year in Japanese cinema because Sancho the Bailiff comes out the same year. Just a lot of really groundbreaking films that I think would come to define what Japanese cinema is in a lot of ways come out in 1954. For Kurosawa personally, his daughter was also born that year. And sort of fun trivia fact, his daughter ended up marrying Daisuke Kato's son, Daisuke Kato, who plays Shichiroji.
So when was this edited and released in America? Was it the same year or did it come out years later?
It came out, so I want to say that it came out the following year or 2 years later because
Okay.
Inagaki's Samurai, I think won the Oscar in 1955. So I want to say that the very edited version of Seven Samurai was released in the US in 56. And then it was actually edited for release. Different edits were for different markets. The full version of the film wasn't shown. Actually, in some rural areas in Japan, they showed it 2 nights, like in 2 parts.
Really?
Yeah. They didn't show the whole thing. So the full unedited version was available in Japan, but in the West, I don't think it was available until the late 70s, early 80s. There was like a roadshow version that went around, which did again kind of result in some suing on Kurosawa's part because people were making money off the showing of the film and he wasn't getting anything. I don't think the full version was available on video in the US until the early 2000s, like the uncut version. So yeah, it was a long time before people were able to like actually see the whole film in the West as Kurosawa intended it.
Right.
I will say my subtitle. I did watch it subtitled.
You have to watch it subtitled.
I know.
No,
I
you
didn't
do
have a
because
choice.
they didn't have they never released a dubbed version. And Kurosawa actually later said, or maybe it wasn't Kurosawa, maybe it was one of the producers, said that they thought that was a mistake. They felt that, you know, it didn't have a chance to like
Get a
like
bigger
meet
audience.
like Western audiences where they were at because they didn't release dubbed versions. But I mean, I don't know why anyone would want to listen to a dubbed actor when you could listen to Toshiro Mifune, but
Time to make the donuts.
So Christina, are we ready? Can we like sound a drum roll or something? Are you ready to induct this film?
I am ready to induct Seven Samurai into the 5 Bucket Club.
There we have it.
Fanfare.
Nice. Well, I hope that you enjoyed your lecture.
That wasn't a lecture. We were running alongside you.
This is widely regarded as one of the greatest films of all time. And it was a joy to watch. I loved it. Loved it.
But it is a film that didn't start out as sort of an instant classic. It had to build over time. That's what's that's the most interesting thing about it, was that it wasn't like when Rashomon was released and all film critics in the West were like, this is, you know, this incredibly beautiful piece of poetry, this significant piece of cinema. When Seven Samurai was released, maybe it was because of the cuts, maybe not, but like this was not a film that was widely appreciated here and it had to build up over time.
Okay, I enjoyed.
Yeah,
I'm glad because there's a lot of watching. So if you don't,
and I did it all in one sitting. I did it in one sitting too.
Wow.
Yeah, so did we. Well, because my son and I watched it. We watched it after lunch one day, so we weren't watching it in the evening. It's nicer when your kids can watch it with you, you know. Like I know I mentioned to you guys that I saw this was a double feature with Yojimbo the music box, by the time I saw it on the big screen, which is an awesome experience. If you ever have the chance to see this on the big screen, you should. I know exactly the moment when the intermission was going to come up, and I needed to know that because I was 7 months pregnant, and the baby was pressing on my bladder. And there was only 2 stalls in the women's room.
Oh no!
And I was like,
Pregnant lady coming through.
I leaned over to my husband. And I was like, as soon as the screen goes black, I'm running out, because I knew it was going to happen. So because there's always that moment where everyone's like, oh wait, there's an intermission.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
So I was like, up and out. You never saw a whale run so fast.
So what are we doing next week?
What are we doing next week? I know what we're doing next week.
The Midnight Sky.
The Midnight Sky, yes.
Yeah, new film.
On Netflix.
Yeah, we managed to find them.
Yep.
Yeah,
Against all odds, we managed to find them.
Well, you did hear that Netflix has now announced they're going to release a new movie every week.
Whether they're good or not is a different story.
That seems to be that's pretty ambitious, but what they consider new, who knows?
Yeah. But what are we doing along with our main feature?
We are pairing this up with Wall-E, and I wish that I was smart enough and clever enough to say right from the beginning that it was because I saw the Clooney Wall-E connection, but that's not the case. Obviously, if anybody knows what the main story is about on the Midnight Sky, it is George Clooney, a man on Earth, and he is trying to warn a spaceship full of astronauts and warning them away from the planet, which has now become inhospitable. Whereas in Wall-E, he's already on a planet that's wasted, and he sets out to let the people on the spaceship know that it's okay to come back. A little symmetry there. So there you go. Midnight Sky and Wall-E. Wall-E.
I was waiting for that, Jeff.
You'll be getting a lot of it next week. So that's it. We're spent.
That's it.
Whew.
I mean, I'm sure I probably could talk about this for a little longer, but at some point we want to eat lunch.
Thanks, everyone, for listening.
Yes,
Thank you.
and come back next week.
Hello, everybody. If you liked the podcast you just heard, then please follow TMI on all of our social media outlets. First and foremost, email us at tmipodcast2018@gmail.com. That is tmipodcast2018@gmail.com.
And you can follow us on Twitter at TMI_podcast2018. Stop over, say hi, give us a compliment. We'd love to hear from you.
Awesome. Make sure you follow us on Instagram as well, which is also TMI_podcast2018.
And of course, we are on Facebook, facebook.com/TMI Podcast 2018. And it should be noted, we also have a community page, so join the forum.
And if you like to watch YouTube, you can see us at TMI Podcast 2018, all one word. Look for the popcorn bucket.
Popcorn bucket. Or you could just go to our website, which has every link there, TMIConfessionalspodcast.com. And we'll see you at the concession stand.
We'll save some popcorn for you. Oh, Samurai, please help us.